My name is Rebecca Mitchell, 34, and I'm still trembling as I type this. 3 hours ago, I inserted my key into the lock of my second home in Portland, a property I inherited from our grandmother and hadn't visited in 8 months, only to find my estranged sister Allison living there with her 3 kids. The furniture I'd carefully selected was gone, replaced with her worn belongings. When our eyes met, instead of shame, I saw defiance. "You abandoned this place," she said coldly. "We needed a home." Little did I know this confrontation would unravel decades of family secrets. I still can't believe I'm sharing this story, but I need to process what happened. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, I'd love to know where you're watching from and how you handled it. This journey taught me so much about standing up for myself, and I hope by sharing it, it helps someone else. Hit subscribe if family drama stories help you feel less alone. And let's dive into how my life changed forever that day in Portland. I built my life on careful planning and hard work. After getting my real estate license at 23, I climbed my way up in Seattle's competitive market, eventually managing a small team at a boutique agency, specializing in investment properties. The irony isn't lost on me that I help others secure their real estate portfolios, while my own family tried to steal mine. My grandmother Evelyn was different from the rest of my family. While my parents constantly favored my younger sister Allison, Grandma Evelyn saw me. She noticed how I saved my allowance while Allison spent hers immediately. She appreciated how I helped in her garden while Allison complained about dirt under her fingernails. Most importantly, she recognized that despite being the responsible one, I rarely received acknowledgement from my parents. When Grandma passed away 2 years ago, I was devastated. We'd been close throughout my childhood, and after my divorce at 30, she became my rock. During those painful months when I questioned everything about my life, I would drive to Portland on weekends and sit with her on her porch swing. "Rebecca," she would say, "sometimes life takes away something to make room for something better." Her Portland craftsman home, with its wraparound porch and mature apple trees, was my sanctuary. The reading of her will shock everyone. While most of her assets were divided equally between family members, she left her home specifically to me. To Rebecca, who appreciates its history and will honor its future, the will stated. My mother's face had darkened with anger, and Allison burst into tears, claiming it wasn't fair. Dad remained silent, as he always did during family conflicts. I never intended to live in the Portland house permanently. My life and career were established in Seattle, but I couldn't bear to sell it either. I spent weekends renovating, carefully preserving its character while updating the electrical system and plumbing. I replaced the roof and restored the original hardwood floors. Every penny from my savings went into maintaining Grandma's home, planning to eventually rent it as passive income. Then the housing market shifted, and my commission-based income took a hit. My property tax bill arrived along with a notice that my apartment rent in Seattle would increase by 15% upon renewal. After crunching numbers late into the night, I realized I needed the rental income from Grandma's house sooner than planned. I contacted a property management company in Portland, scheduled professional photos for the following week, and packed an overnight bag for a quick trip to prepare the house. The 3-hour drive from Seattle gave me time to calculate potential rental rates and plan which personal items to remove before tenants moved in. As I pulled into the driveway, something felt off. The porch light was on, though it was only 4 p.m. The garden, which I'd paid a service to maintain monthly, looked different. There were children's toys scattered across the yard. I figured neighborhood kids must have left them while playing. Then I noticed curtains in the windows that weren't mine. My heartbeat quickened as I approached the front door. I inserted my key with growing apprehension, half expecting it wouldn't work, but it turned smoothly. I pushed open the door and stepped into what should have been my empty, carefully maintained home. Instead, I walked into the middle of someone else's life. The entryway table where I kept Grandma's collection of vintage glass paperweights was gone, replaced by a shoe rack overflowing with sneakers and boots of various sizes. The walls, which I'd recently painted a soft sage green, were now adorned with children's artwork held up by colorful pushpins. The hardwood floors I'd spent thousands restoring were covered with mismatched area rugs. I heard a television playing somewhere in the house, the familiar sound of a cartoon theme song. As I stood frozen in shock, a small child with pigtails, my niece Lily, though I barely recognized how much she'd grown, came running around the corner. She stopped abruptly when she saw me, her eyes wide. "Mommy!" she screamed. "There's a lady in our house. Our house." The words hit me like a physical blow. Footsteps approached quickly, and then Allison appeared, wiping her hands on a dish towel. When she saw me, her expression changed from alarm to something hardened and defensive. Behind her, I glimpsed her other children, Emma and Tyler, peering around the kitchen doorway. "Rebecca," she said flatly, "what are you doing here?" The absurdity of her question left me momentarily speechless. What was I doing here? In my own house? "What am I doing here?" I finally managed. "What are you doing here, Allison? This is my house." She crossed her arms. "We live here now." Those 4 words sent my world spinning. The last time I'd seen Allison was at the family Easter gathering 8 months ago, which had ended with her storming out after I refused to loan her money yet again. She'd called me selfish and said I'd always had everything handed to me, a particularly painful accusation given our family history. Now she stood in my grandmother's home, my home, acting as if she belonged there, while I was the intruder. "You need to explain yourself right now," I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and confusion. Allison glanced at her children. "Kids, go to your rooms, please. Aunt Rebecca and I need to talk." "But Mom," 12-year-old Emma began to protest. "Now, Emma," Allison said firmly. I watched as the children reluctantly retreated upstairs. Once they were out of earshot, I turned back to my sister. "How did you get in here? How long have you been staying here? Where is all my furniture?" The questions tumbled out in rapid succession. Allison walked past me to close the front door I'd left open in my shock. "Let's sit down," she said with a calmness that only infuriated me more. She led me into what had been Grandma's formal dining room. The antique mahogany table and chairs that had hosted countless family dinners were gone, replaced by a scratched IKEA table surrounded by mismatched chairs. My grandmother's china cabinet was still there, but empty of the heirloom dishes. Instead, it displayed children's sports trophies and school certificates. "Start talking," I said, refusing to sit. Allison sighed heavily as she lowered herself into a chair. "After Mark left us last year, things got really tough. I lost my job when the daycare center closed, and then we got evicted from our apartment. Mom said we could stay here temporarily." "Mom?" I repeated incredulously. "Mom has no right to offer you my house." "It's the family house," Allison shot back. "Just because Grandma played favorites and gave it to you doesn't mean the rest of us don't have rights to it too." The accusation stung. Grandma didn't play favorites. She made a decision about her own property, and I've spent thousands maintaining it. While it sat empty, Allison's voice rose. "You have your fancy Seattle apartment and this place just sitting here collecting dust. We needed a home, Rebecca. What was I supposed to do? Have my kids sleep in the car?" "You could have called me," I said. "You could have asked. Instead, you broke in." "I didn't break in," she interrupted. "Mom gave me the key." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Our mother had a spare key for emergencies, but I'd never imagined she would use it like this. "Where is all my furniture?" I asked again. "Grandma's things?" Allison looked away. "We needed to make room for our stuff. It's in the garage." I marched through the kitchen, noting with dismay the cabinet doors hanging askew, and the countertops cluttered with dirty dishes, and yanked open the door to the attached garage. What I saw made me gasp. My carefully chosen furniture was stacked haphazardly, much of it scratched or dented. Boxes of Grandma's belongings were piled in corners, some open with contents spilling out. Water stains on the cardboard suggested the roof leak I'd fixed had returned. When I returned to the dining room, I was shaking with rage. "You had no right. None of you had any right to do this. We had nowhere else to go." Allison's eyes filled with tears. The kids were scared. Rebecca. Emma was having anxiety attacks. Tyler was getting in fights at school. We were about to be homeless. "So you decided to steal my house instead of asking for help properly?" "I tried," she shouted. I called you 3 times after the eviction notice came. You never called back. I vaguely remembered missed calls from Allison months ago. But after years of her financial emergencies and drama, I'd stopped responding immediately. Every conversation ended with her asking for money, and me feeling guilty for saying no. That doesn't give you the right to move into my house without permission, I said firmly. Mom said. I don't care what Mom said. This house is legally mine, not hers to offer. Our argument was interrupted by a small voice. Are you going to make us leave? 5-year-old Lily stood in the doorway, her bottom lip trembling. Behind her, Emma and Tyler watched with worried expressions. The sight of my niece's fear momentarily dampened my anger. I'd never been close with Allison's children, another casualty of our strained relationship, but I didn't want to traumatize them either. Allison immediately went to Lily and picked her up. No, sweetie. This is our home now. Aunt Rebecca is just visiting. Her presumption reignited my fury. I am not just visiting, Allison. You cannot stay here indefinitely. This is legally my property. We have nowhere else to go, she repeated, holding Lily tighter. The kids are finally settled in school. They have friends in the neighborhood. I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly despite my anger. I need to make some calls and figure this out. I'm giving you 48 hours to explain exactly how this happened and to make arrangements. After that, we're discussing a proper timeline for you to leave. You would put your own family on the street? Allison's voice was accusing. I would expect my family not to lie to me, steal from me, and damage my property, I replied coldly. 48 hours, Allison. And I want to talk to Mom. I turned and walked out, ignoring her protests. In the car, my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely text my assistant in Seattle to cancel my appointments for the next few days. Then I found the nearest hotel and booked a room. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of my niece and nephews watching from my window, and felt a confusing mix of anger, guilt, and determination. Something wasn't right about this situation, and I intended to get to the bottom of it. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of uncovering a family conspiracy that had been years in the making. I barely slept that night in the hotel. My mind kept replaying not just the confrontation with Allison, but a lifetime of similar dynamics between us. Growing up, Allison was the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she had our mother wrapped around her finger from day one. Where I was serious and responsible, Allison was charming and carefree. When we were teenagers, I got straight A's and worked part-time at the local grocery store to save for college. Allison barely passed her classes and spent weekends partying, but somehow received more praise from our parents for her social skills and outgoing personality. The pattern continued into adulthood. I put myself through college with scholarships, loans, and that grocery store job. Allison dropped out after 1 semester and moved back home. When she got pregnant with Emma at 22, our parents helped her with rent and childcare. When she married Mark after Tyler was born, they paid for the wedding. When the marriage started falling apart after Lily arrived, they paid for counseling. Meanwhile, when my own marriage ended 4 years ago, my mother's primary concern seemed to be how embarrassing it was that I couldn't make it work. No offers of emotional support, let alone financial help. Grandma Evelyn was the only one who saw the unfairness. Your parents mean well, she once told me, but they've always mistaken Allison's neediness for closeness. They don't know how to connect with your independence. The night after discovering Allison in my house, I called our mother. The conversation went exactly as I feared it would. Of course I gave her the key, Mom said defensively. What was I supposed to do? Let my daughter and grandchildren live in a shelter while her sister has 2 homes? It's not your house to give away, Mom, I replied, trying to keep my voice level. You had no right to let Allison move in without even talking to me about it. I tried talking to you about helping your sister after Mark left, she countered. You always have an excuse not to help. This was a gross mischaracterization. After Mark left, I had offered to pay for 3 months of Allison's rent to give her time to find a job. She had used the money but made no effort to find employment, then asked for more. When I suggested she apply for government assistance and provided information about job training programs, she accused me of being condescending. Giving Allison access to my house without my knowledge isn't helping her, I said. It's enabling her to avoid taking responsibility again. You sound just like your grandmother, Mom replied, her voice sharp. Always so high and mighty, looking down on everyone else's struggles while pretending you got everything on your own. The conversation devolved from there, with my mother refusing to acknowledge she'd done anything wrong. By the time we hung up, it was clear I would get no support from that quarter. Next, I called my father, not expecting much. My parents had divorced when I was in college, and Dad had largely retreated from family matters. To my surprise, he was supportive. Your mother has always had a blind spot when it comes to Allison, he said, and that house is legally yours. Evelyn was very clear about that in her will. Did you know they were planning this? I asked. His silence told me everything. I heard your mother discussing it with Allison a while back, he finally admitted. I told them it was a bad idea, but you know how they are when they get something in their heads. Why didn't you warn me? He sighed heavily. I should have. I'm sorry, Rebecca. I thought they'd come to their senses. The next morning, I contacted Patrick Donovan, the family lawyer who had handled Grandma's will. He confirmed what I already knew. The house was unequivocally mine. He also seemed troubled by the situation. Evelyn was very specific about her wishes, he said. She told me privately that she was leaving you the house because she knew you would respect it. She was concerned about your sister's financial responsibility. After hanging up, I decided to do some investigation. I drove back to the house while Allison was out taking the kids to school information. I'd gleaned from a quick call to Emma on the pretext of checking if they needed groceries. The house looked even worse in daylight. The garden was overgrown in some places, trampled in others. The porch had muddy footprints and bike tracks. Inside, I was appalled at the condition of Grandma's once immaculate home. Crayon marks on walls, stained carpets, scratched woodwork. In the master bedroom, my bedroom, which Allison had obviously claimed, I found utility bills showing she'd been living there not just for a few weeks, but for 5 months. The power and water had been switched to her name, but late payment notices were stuffed in a drawer. Most disturbing was what I didn't find. The jewelry box containing Grandma's wedding ring and other family heirlooms she'd left me was missing from the closet where I'd stored it. So was the antique silver tea service that had belonged to my great-grandmother. As I continued searching, a chill ran down my spine when I found a file folder hidden in the back of the desk drawer. Inside were printouts of emails between my mother and Allison dating back nearly a year, discussing plans for Allison to reclaim the family home. Rebecca doesn't need 2 homes, my mother had written. She's always been selfish. Your grandmother would want the house to be used by family who needs it. Another email outlined a plan. Wait until she's not checking on the place regularly, then move in. Once you're established with the kids in local schools, it will be harder for her to kick you out. Possession is 9/10 of the law. I felt physically ill reading these messages. This wasn't a desperate move by a sister in need. This was a calculated plan to take what was mine, justified by a lifetime of resentment and entitlement. But the most shocking discovery came when I found a copy of Grandma's will, or rather, what appeared to be her will, but with subtle alterations. In this version, the house was left to my granddaughters jointly. I recognized it immediately as a forgery, likely created to bolster their claim if I took legal action. When I heard Allison's car in the driveway, I quickly gathered the evidence I'd found and left through the back door. My mind was racing. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about years of manipulation, lies, and a family dynamic that had always cast me as the villain for setting boundaries and expecting accountability. I needed to think carefully about my next move. The stakes had just gotten much higher. If you've ever uncovered a betrayal that ran deeper than you initially thought, drop a comment below. Sometimes the hardest part is realizing that what you're dealing with isn't a misunderstanding, but an intentional deception. I had to take a moment to breathe before deciding what to do next. And your support means everything right now. With the evidence I'd collected secure in my hotel room, I decided to continue investigating. My real estate background had taught me to be thorough before making major decisions, and this situation definitely qualified. I returned to the house the next day, when I knew Allison would be at a job interview. information I'd strategically extracted during a tense phone conversation where I pretended to be considering her request to stay longer. This time, I went with a specific purpose: to document the condition of the property and search more thoroughly for missing heirlooms. What I hadn't expected was to run into Martha Johnson, the elderly neighbor who had lived next door to Grandma for decades. She was watering plants in her front yard when she spotted me. "Rebecca, it's been ages," she called, waving enthusiastically. "I was beginning to think you'd abandoned the old place entirely." Her choice of words, the same Allison had used, made me suspicious. I crossed the lawn to speak with her. "What makes you think I abandoned it?" I asked carefully. Martha looked confused. "Well, your mother told me you were too busy with your career in Seattle to bother with the house anymore. Said you were planning to sell it but were letting Allison stay until the market improved." She lowered her voice. "Between us, I was relieved. Would have been a shame for the house to go to strangers after being in your family so long." My blood boiled at this new deception, but I kept my expression neutral. "When did my mother tell you this?" "Oh, must have been last fall? Around September, I think. She came by with Allison to explain the situation. They even brought over a key for emergencies, just like your grandmother used to do." September. 8 months ago, right after our blow-up at the family Easter gathering. I thanked Martha and returned to the house, my mind racing with implications. This plan had been in motion for far longer than I'd realized. Inside, I began taking photos of the property damage for insurance purposes. In the basement, I discovered water damage from a leaking pipe that had clearly been neglected for months. In a corner, hidden behind boxes of Allison's belongings, I found several garbage bags. Inside were items I recognized immediately: Grandma's hand-crocheted afghans, photo albums, and the smaller pieces from her china collection. They'd been discarded like trash. In the garage, I started examining the furniture more carefully. Several pieces were missing entirely, including an antique secretary desk that had been in the family for generations. I began calling local pawn shops and second-hand stores, describing the missing items. On my third call, I struck gold. "Yeah, we bought a desk like that about 3 months ago," said the owner of Second Chance Furniture. "Lady said it was her grandmother's, and she needed cash for her kids. Got some jewelry and silver from her too." My heart sank. "Would you happen to have records of who sold these items?" "Sure do. Need it for tax purposes. Name was Allison Mitchell." I thanked him and added this information to my growing file of evidence. Then I made my most disturbing discovery yet. In the attic, searching for more missing items, I found a box containing Grandma Evelyn's personal journals. I hadn't known she kept journals, and seeing her familiar handwriting brought tears to my eyes. I sat on the dusty attic floor and began reading the most recent volume. The entries revealed a family dynamic even more troubling than I'd realized. Grandma had been aware of my mother's manipulation and favoritism, documenting instances when Mom had tried to pressure her into giving money to Allison or changing her will. The final entry, dated just weeks before her death, was heartbreaking. "Judith, my mother, came by again today, insisting I should leave the house to Allison. Says Rebecca doesn't need it with her successful career. She doesn't understand that this isn't about need, it's about responsibility and respect. Rebecca visits me weekly, helps maintain this place, listens to my stories, and values our family history. Allison has been here twice in 3 years, both times to ask for money. I love all my family, but I know Rebecca will honor this home and what it represents. I only hope Judith will eventually accept my decision." She never got her wish, but reading her words strengthened my resolve to honor her intentions. As I continued searching, I found bank statements showing withdrawals from Grandma's account in the months before her death, large sums that didn't align with her normal spending patterns. Had my mother been taking advantage of Grandma financially as well? I was photographing these documents when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the attic window, I saw my mother getting out of her sedan. I hadn't expected her to show up, but in retrospect, I should have. Allison would have called her immediately after my visit. I quickly gathered the journals and statements, added them to my evidence file, and made my way downstairs. By the time my mother let herself in with her key, I was sitting calmly at the kitchen table. Her surprise at seeing me quickly morphed into defensiveness. "I see you're still harassing your sister," she said by way of greeting. "Interesting perspective," I replied evenly. "I would call it investigating theft and fraud." "Don't be so dramatic, Rebecca. Allison needed help, and you weren't using this place. That doesn't make it hers to take, or yours to give." My mother sat down across from me, her expression softening into the manipulative concern I knew all too well. "Honey, I know you're upset, but try to see the bigger picture. Your sister has 3 children and nowhere to go. You have a successful career and a nice apartment in Seattle. Would it really hurt you to let them stay here, at least until they get back on their feet?" In the past, this approach might have worked. I'd always been susceptible to guilt, especially when it came to family. But the evidence I'd uncovered had immunized me against her manipulation. "I might have considered a proper arrangement if you and Allison had been honest from the beginning," I said. "Instead, you conspired behind my back, lied to neighbors, damaged my property, and sold family heirlooms. So no, I don't think I'll be letting them stay." My mother's facade cracked. "You've always been selfish. Just like your grandmother. Grandma wasn't selfish. She was fair. And she saw through your manipulation." "Oh, please. She played favorites just like you're doing now, punishing Allison because her life hasn't been as perfect as yours." I laughed without humor. "My perfect life? The one where I worked multiple jobs to put myself through school while you and Dad paid Allison's bills? The one where I got zero support during my divorce while the entire family rallied around Allison when Mark left? That perfect life?" My mother dismissed my words with a wave of her hand. "You've always been able to take care of yourself. Allison needs help. Allison needs to learn responsibility," I countered. "And enabling her by giving her my house isn't helping her." "It's not just your house," my mother snapped. "It's a family home that Grandma specifically left to me." "Well, she made a mistake," my mother said coldly. "She should have considered the needs of the entire family." In that moment, I saw clearly what I'd always suspected, but never fully acknowledged. My mother would never see my side. In her eyes, I would always be the one who should sacrifice, who should give in, who should put Allison's needs above my own. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "And I want you to give me your key." "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Give me your key, and don't come back unless invited." "And what about Allison and the children?" "I'll deal with Allison separately. This isn't about them right now. This is about you and me, and boundaries that should have been established a long time ago." She stared at me for a long moment, then slowly reached into her purse and removed her keyring. With deliberate movements, she detached the key to my house and placed it on the table between us. "You'll regret this," she said as she stood. "When you're all alone with your precious house and your precious boundaries, you'll regret pushing away the only family you have." "No," I replied, surprising myself with my calmness. "I won't." After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, absorbing what had just happened. For perhaps the first time in my life, I had stood firm against my mother's manipulation without feeling guilty afterward. Instead, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. I had one more confrontation ahead, the most important one. But first, I needed to organize my evidence and prepare for what might become a legal battle. I hadn't wanted this fight, but now that it had been forced upon me, I intended to win. I know so many of you have faced similar crossroads with family, that moment when you realize standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. If you've been in my shoes, facing a painful family confrontation, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments. Did you find that same mixture of sadness and strength? Stay with me as I prepare for the most difficult family meeting of my life. The next morning, I called Allison and told her we needed to talk, all of us. "I want you, Mom, and me to meet at the house this afternoon at 2 p.m., I said, leaving no room for negotiation. "Make sure the kids are elsewhere." "They have activities after school anyway," Allison replied, her voice wary. "What is this about?" "I think you know exactly what it's about," I said. "I'll see you at 2. I spent the morning organizing my evidence and consulting with a lawyer about my options. Patrick Donovan, Grandma's attorney, had referred me to Sarah Chen, who specialized in property disputes. Her advice was clear: document everything, establish boundaries immediately, and be prepared for a formal eviction process if necessary. Family situations are always complicated, Sarah told me. But legally, your position is strong. The house is unquestionably yours. Their unauthorized occupancy and the sale of your personal property are clear violations of your rights. Armed with this reassurance, I arrived at the house 15 minutes early. I wanted to be there first, to set the tone of the meeting. I placed my file of evidence on the dining room table and waited. Mom arrived next, her expression guarded. She said nothing as she took a seat opposite me. Allison came in a few minutes later, visibly nervous. I think we all know why we're here, I began, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. I've spent the last few days investigating exactly what's been happening with this house, and I'm appalled at what I've discovered. I opened the file and laid out the evidence piece by piece. The utility bills showing Allison had been living there for 5 months, not the few weeks she'd initially implied. The emails between her and Mom planning the occupation of my house. Photos of the property damage. The receipt from Second Chance Furniture documenting Allison's sale of family heirlooms. I also spoke with Martha next door, I continued. She told me that you two informed the neighbors I had abandoned the property and was letting Allison stay until I sold it. That's a complete fabrication. My mother's face remained impassive, but Allison had the decency to look ashamed. I found Grandma's journals too, I said, watching my mother's expression change to alarm. I know about your attempts to pressure her into changing her will. I know about the money that went missing from her accounts. Now you're just making accusations, Mom said sharply. Evelyn was confused toward the end. She probably misunderstood our conversations. The bank records don't lie, I replied, sliding them across the table. And Grandma was sharp until the very end. You know that as well as I do. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Allison broke down. I'm sorry, she said, tears streaming down her face. I know it was wrong to move in without telling you, but Mom said it would be okay, that you wouldn't really mind once you knew we needed the place. Don't apologize to her, Mom snapped. You have children to house. Rebecca has an obligation to help her family. No, Mom, I don't, I said firmly. I have no obligation to let someone take advantage of me, family or not. And let's be honest, this was never about Allison needing emergency housing. This was about you being angry that Grandma left the house to me instead of dividing it equally, or better yet, giving it to your favorite daughter. That's not. It is true, I interrupted. You've been resentful since the will was read. You never thought I deserved this house. You don't, Mom exploded. You've always had everything come easy to you. You with your perfect grades and your perfect job and your perfect life. Allison struggles. She needs help. She deserves support. I've worked for everything I have, I replied, keeping my voice level despite my rising anger. Nothing was handed to me, quite the opposite. You and Dad paid for Allison's mistakes while I put myself through college. You bailed her out when she mismanaged money while I built my career from scratch. You supported her through her divorce while telling me mine was my own fault. Allison looked between us, her expression confused. That's not how I remember it, she said slowly. You were always the favorite, Rebecca. Mom and Dad were always talking about how smart you were, how responsible, how you never needed them like I did. I stared at her, genuinely shocked. Is that what you think? That being self-sufficient made me the favorite? Wasn't it obvious? They were always so proud of you. They expected me to succeed, Allison. There's a difference. When you struggled, they helped you. When I struggled, I was told to figure it out, because I was the responsible one. My sister fell silent, clearly processing this different perspective on our shared childhood. This is getting us nowhere, my mother interjected. The point is, Allison and her children need a place to live. This house is sitting empty most of the time. It makes sense for them to use it. The house isn't empty. It's mine, I stated firmly. And if you had approached me honestly instead of going behind my back, we might have worked something out. But you didn't. You lied, you manipulated, and you stole from me. We didn't steal, Allison began weakly. You sold Grandma's jewelry, I cut in. Items she specifically left to me. You sold the antique desk that's been in our family for generations. What would you call that? Allison couldn't meet my eyes. I needed money for the kids, she whispered. For school supplies and clothes. Mom said you probably wouldn't miss those things anyway. I turned to our mother, who at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. You encouraged her to sell family heirlooms? You weren't using them, she replied defensively. They were just sitting in boxes. They were in boxes because I was keeping them safe until I decided what to do with them. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. This is exactly what Grandma was afraid would happen. This is why she left the house to me specifically, not to all of us jointly. That was her mistake, Mom said coldly. No, Mom. Her mistake was thinking you would ever respect her wishes. I turned back to Allison. I need to know exactly what items you sold. All of them. And I expect you to help me try to recover as many as possible. Allison nodded miserably. I'll make a list. And I'm sorry, Rebecca. I really am. I didn't know what else to do. Something in her apology felt sincere, and I felt a flicker of compassion despite everything. You could have asked me for help the right way, I said more gently. Without the lies and manipulation, would you have said yes? She asked. I considered this honestly. I don't know. But we'll never know now, will we? You and Mom made sure of that. My mother stood abruptly. I can see this conversation is pointless. You've clearly made up your mind to put your sister and her children out on the street. Stop it, Mom, I said, exhausted by her dramatics. I haven't said anything about what happens next. I'm still figuring that out. But what I do know is that I won't be manipulated anymore. I looked between them, these two women who were supposed to be my family, who were supposed to love and support me. Instead, they had conspired against me, justified theft, and tried to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. Here's what's going to happen now, I continued. Mom, you are no longer welcome in this house, unless specifically invited by me. I don't trust you, and I won't have you undermining my decisions or encouraging Allison to take advantage of me. My mother opened her mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. This is non-negotiable. If you can't respect this boundary, I'll have the locks changed and consider a restraining order. She glared at me but remained silent. Allison? I turned to my sister, who looked both ashamed and frightened. I understand that you and the kids need stability right now. I'm not going to demand you leave immediately, but this can't continue as it has been. What are you saying? She asked cautiously. I'm saying we need to establish some ground rules and a timeline. You can stay temporarily, and I mean temporarily while you make proper arrangements for your future. But there will be conditions, and we'll need a formal agreement. What kind of conditions? She asked. Financial responsibility, no more selling my belongings, proper care of the property, and most importantly, honesty. If I discover any more lies or manipulation, all deals are off. Allison nodded slowly. That seems fair, she admitted. It's more than fair, I replied. It's generous, considering what you've done. My mother scoffed. Always so sanctimonious, Rebecca. Just like your grandmother. I'll take that as a compliment, I said. Grandma was fair and honest. I try to be the same. We'll see how fair you are when Allison and her children are forced out of their home, she retorted, grabbing her purse. I'm leaving. This is pointless. Mom, stop, Allison said suddenly, surprising both of us. Rebecca is being reasonable. More reasonable than we deserve after what we did. My mother stared at her in disbelief. Whose side are you on? There shouldn't be sides, Allison replied quietly. We're family. Exactly my point. Family helps family. But we didn't ask for help, Mom. We took what wasn't ours. That's different. I watched this exchange with a mixture of surprise and guarded hope. Was Allison finally seeing through our mother's manipulation? Fine, Mom snapped. If you want to grovel to your sister, go ahead. Just don't come crying to me when she kicks you out. She stormed toward the door, pausing only to deliver one final barb. You're making a mistake, Rebecca. Someday you'll need family, and we won't be there for you. After she left, Allison and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several moments. She's wrong, you know, Allison finally said. About you being selfish. I've had a lot of time to think lately, and I've realized some things about our family, about how Mom has always pitted us against each other. I looked at her skeptically. This is quite a revelation after participating in a scheme to take my house. I know, and I'm sorry, truly. When Mom first suggested it, I was desperate. Mark had left, I'd lost my job, the eviction notice came. It seemed like you had so much, and I had nothing. It felt justified somehow. She sighed heavily. But living here, surrounded by Grandma's things, thinking about why she left this place to you, I started to see things differently. What do you mean? You visit her grave every month, don't you? Allison asked. Surprised, I nodded. How did you know? The caretaker mentioned it when I went there on her birthday. He thought I was you at first. Said you always bring yellow roses, her favorite. I didn't know you visited her grave, I admitted. Just that once, Allison said, looking ashamed. Mom kept saying Grandma played favorites with you, but she loved you because you loved her. You showed up. I didn't. It was perhaps the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. But I wasn't ready to completely let my guard down. There had been too much deception. I need time to process all this, I said finally, and to figure out what happens next. For now, you and the kids can stay while we work out a formal agreement. But Mom stays away. That's my condition. Allison nodded. I understand. And Rebecca? Thank you. I know you don't have to do this. As I left the house, my house, I felt emotionally drained, but also strangely hopeful. Perhaps there was a path forward that honored Grandma's wishes while still showing compassion for my sister's situation. But first, I needed to protect myself legally and ensure there would be no more unpleasant surprises. The family dynamic had shifted today. Whether that shift would lead to healing or further fracture remained to be seen. 2 days later, I returned to the house for what I hoped would be a productive discussion about next steps. I'd prepared a preliminary agreement outlining terms for Allison's temporary residency. She would pay a nominal rent to cover utilities and maintenance, respect the property, and actively seek permanent housing. In return, I would allow her to stay for up to 6 months, generous terms by any standard. I arrived to find not just Allison waiting, but my mother as well. The children had been sent to play at a neighbor's house, which at least showed Allison was respecting my wish to discuss adult matters privately. I thought I made it clear you weren't welcome here, I said to my mother as I set my briefcase on the table. Allison invited me, she replied smugly. This is her home too. Actually, it's not, I corrected her. And Allison doesn't have the authority to invite anyone into my house against my wishes. I'm sorry, Rebecca, Allison said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. Mom insisted on being here for the discussion. She said she wanted to make sure I didn't agree to anything unfair. I sighed, realizing I should have anticipated this interference. Fine. Let's get this over with. I opened my briefcase and removed 3 copies of the agreement I'd prepared. I've drafted terms for a temporary arrangement, I explained, sliding copies across the table. It's straightforward. Allison and the children can stay for up to 6 months while she finds permanent housing. She'll pay $500 monthly toward utilities and maintenance, well below market rent for a house this size. In return, she agrees to properly maintain the property, not sell or remove any of my belongings, and actively search for her own place. Allison skimmed the document, her expression neutral. My mother, however, didn't even bother looking at it before scoffing. This is ridiculous, she declared. You're charging your own sister rent when she can barely feed her children? I'm charging her considerably less than what I could get from actual tenants, I pointed out. And the agreement includes a clause allowing her to perform maintenance tasks in lieu of part of the payment if finances are tight in a given month. How generous, Mom replied sarcastically. Rebecca the benevolent, allowing her sister to fix the toilet instead of paying full rent. I ignored the barb. The point is to establish a formal arrangement with clear expectations and responsibilities. This protects both of us. It protects you, you mean, she countered. Mom, please, Allison interjected. These terms are actually pretty reasonable. My mother turned to her in disbelief. You can't be serious. She's trying to turn you into her tenant when this should be your home too. But it's not my home, Allison said quietly. It's Rebecca's. Grandma left it to her. Your grandmother made a mistake, Mom insisted, her voice rising. She never intended for Rebecca to charge family for using the family home. Actually, I said, reaching back into my briefcase, I have evidence that contradicts that claim. I removed Grandma's journal and opened it to a marked page. Grandma wrote about her decision extensively. She specifically considered the possibility that Allison might need housing someday and still chose to leave the house solely to me because, in her words, Rebecca will make fair decisions about the property while ensuring it remains a sound investment rather than being neglected or exploited. My mother's face darkened. You have no right to read Evelyn's private thoughts. They're not private anymore. They're evidence of her intentions, which you've repeatedly tried to undermine. Allison looked between us, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating tension. Can we please focus on the agreement? 6 months seems reasonable to me. It gives me time to find a job and save for a deposit on an apartment. You shouldn't have to leave at all, Mom exclaimed. This house is big enough for all of you. Rebecca doesn't even live here most of the time. Because I live in Seattle, where my job is, I reminded her. That doesn't make this any less my property. You have always been selfish, Mom spat. Even as a child, you refused to share with your sister. That's not true, I replied, keeping my voice level despite my rising anger. I shared plenty. What I objected to was having my things taken without permission, which, ironically, is exactly what's happened here. Mom, Allison said firmly, please stop. You're not helping. Our mother turned to her, betrayal evident in her expression. I'm trying to help you keep a roof over your children's heads. Why are you suddenly taking her side? I'm not taking sides. I'm trying to be reasonable. Rebecca owns this house. She's offering us a place to stay temporarily while I get back on my feet. That's more than fair. It's not fair at all, Mom insisted. She has 2 homes while you have none. I have 2 properties because I worked hard and made sound financial decisions, I said. And one of those properties was specifically left to me by Grandma, who apparently anticipated exactly this kind of situation. Mom slammed her hand on the table. Enough about what Evelyn wanted. She's gone, and the living need to make practical decisions. It makes no sense for this house to sit empty most of the time when Allison and her children need it. The house doesn't sit empty, I corrected her. It's an investment property that I maintain and plan to rent out for income I need, especially after spending thousands repairing damage from Allison's unauthorized occupancy. So money means more to you than family, Mom concluded, her tone dripping with judgment. That's not what I said. But financial security is important, and I won't apologize for protecting mine, even at the expense of your sisters? Before I could respond, Allison intervened. Stop it, both of you. This isn't helping anyone. She turned to me. I accept your terms, Rebecca. 6 months is generous, and the rent is fair, Mom gasped. Allison, you can't be serious. I am serious, Mom. Rebecca is right, this is her house, and she's offering us a reasonable arrangement under the circumstances. I felt an unexpected surge of respect for my sister in that moment. Perhaps she really had begun to see through our mother's manipulation. If you sign this agreement, you're betraying your family, Mom declared dramatically. I'm doing what's best for my children, Allison replied firmly. They need stability, not constant conflict. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I've heard enough. Since you're both determined to go through with this charade, I want no part of it. She stormed toward the door but paused before leaving. Oh, and Rebecca? I didn't want to bring this up in front of your sister, but since you're being so rigid about your property, you should know that your precious grandmother promised me her jewelry collection years ago. Verbally, of course. So whatever Allison sold was rightfully mine, not yours. The claim was so absurd I almost laughed. That's convenient, Mom. Strange that Grandma never mentioned this promise to me, or to her lawyer, or in her meticulously kept journals. She didn't tell you everything, Mom replied coldly. Despite what you think, after she left, Allison signed the agreement without further discussion. I'll start looking for jobs tomorrow, she said. And apartments too, though I may need the full 6 months to save enough for a deposit. I understand, I replied. Just keep me updated on your progress. As I prepared to leave, Allison stopped me with an unexpected question. Was Mom always like this? So manipulative? The question caught me off guard. I think so, yes. But it took me a long time to see it clearly. She nodded thoughtfully. I'm starting to see it now. And I'm sorry, Rebecca, for everything. Her apology seemed sincere, but after everything that had happened, I wasn't ready to fully trust it. Actions speak louder than words, I told her. Show me you mean it by honoring our agreement. As I drove back to my hotel, I reflected on the day's events. The confrontation had gone better than expected in some ways. Allison had agreed to my terms despite our mother's interference, but Mom's parting shot about Grandma's jewelry had unsettled me. It was clearly a lie, yet it represented a new level of manipulation, a willingness to rewrite history entirely to justify her actions. I wondered if this was truly the end of the matter, or merely the beginning of a new phase of family conflict. Unfortunately, I would soon discover it was the latter. The relative calm lasted exactly 3 days before my phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Allison, her voice tight with tension. Rebecca, I think you need to come over. Mom's here with a moving truck and some men. She says she's taking furniture that belongs to her. I was already pulling on clothes as she spoke. Don't let them take anything. I'm on my way. By the time I arrived, a large moving truck was parked in the driveway, and 2 burly men were carrying out the antique dining table, one of the few pieces of Grandma's furniture that Allison hadn't relocated to the garage. Stop right there, I called, jumping out of my car. Put that back immediately. My mother emerged from the house, arms crossed defensively. This table belonged to my mother. I'm taking it. That table was specifically listed in Grandma's will as part of the house contents left to me, I countered, pulling out my phone. Put it back, or I'm calling the police to report theft. You wouldn't dare. I dialed 911 and held the phone to my ear, maintaining eye contact with her the entire time. When the dispatcher answered, I calmly reported that unauthorized individuals were removing property from my home. My mother's expression shifted from defiance to disbelief as she realized I wasn't bluffing. She signaled to the movers to return the table to the house. This isn't over, Rebecca, she hissed as the men reluctantly carried the table back inside. You can't keep what rightfully belongs to the whole family. Actually, I can. It's called inheritance law. I ended the call with the dispatcher, explaining that the situation was temporarily under control. Now please leave my property before the police arrive. My mother stormed to her car, but not before delivering a final threat. You've made an enemy today. Don't think the rest of the family won't hear about this. After she drove away, the moving truck following, I went inside to find Allison standing in the hallway, looking shaken. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I tried to stop her, but she just showed up with those men and started ordering them to take things. It's not your fault, I assured her, though I was still trembling with anger and adrenaline. But this proves we need better security measures. That same day, I had locks changed, security cameras installed, and a formal inventory taken of everything in the house. I also contacted Sarah Chen, the lawyer, who advised me to send a cease and desist letter to my mother. Document everything, she emphasized. If she continues this behavior, we may need to consider a restraining order. The thought of legally barring my own mother from contacting me was surreal, but I couldn't deny the relief I felt at the possibility of ending her manipulation. Over the next few weeks, I divided my time between Seattle and Portland, gradually developing a new routine. I worked remotely when possible and spent weekends at the Portland house, using the time to both monitor Allison's compliance with our agreement and continue preparing the property for eventual rental. To my surprise, Allison was keeping her word. She'd found a part-time job at a local bakery and was actively searching for affordable housing. She kept the house reasonably clean and had even started making repairs to some of the damage caused during her initial occupation. One evening, as I was fixing a loose railing on the porch, Emma, Allison's 12-year-old daughter, came out and sat nearby, watching me work. Mom says we have to move soon, she said after a while. Not right away, I assured her. You have time to find a good place. She nodded, picking at a splinter in the porch floor. Grandma says you're being mean by making us leave, but Mom says you're being fair. Her comment caught me off guard. Your mom said that? Emma nodded again. She told Grandma to stop saying bad things about you in front of us. They had a big fight about it last week. This was news to me. Allison hadn't mentioned any conflict with our mother. Mom's different now, Emma continued thoughtfully. Less stressed. She used to cry a lot when we lived with Grandma before coming here. You lived with Grandma? This was another detail Allison had omitted. For like 3 months after Dad left, Grandma was always telling Mom what to do, and they argued all the time. That's when Grandma said we should move here instead, that it was our turn to live in the nice house. This new information cast the situation in a different light. It seemed my mother's manipulation extended beyond just me. She had been controlling Allison as well, using her vulnerability to further her own agenda regarding Grandma's house. Later that evening, after the children were in bed, I broached the subject with Allison. Emma mentioned you lived with Mom before coming here. You never told me that. Allison sighed heavily. It was horrible. I was already struggling with the divorce, and then living under Mom's roof. She criticized everything I did, from how I parented to how I dressed for job interviews. Nothing was ever good enough. That sounds familiar, I said wryly. I'm starting to understand what you've dealt with all these years, she admitted. Mom always painted you as the lucky one, the favorite, the one who had everything easy. But that wasn't true, was it? No, I said simply. It wasn't. When she suggested taking over Grandma's house, your house, she made it sound justified, like we were just reclaiming what should have been family property anyway. She said you were selfish for keeping it to yourself when you already had a place in Seattle. Allison looked ashamed. I wanted to believe her because it solved my problems. And now I see she was using my situation to get what she wanted, control over Grandma's house, which she never forgave her for leaving to you. This conversation marked a turning point in my relationship with Allison. For the first time, we began to see each other not as rivals in our mother's zero-sum game of affection, but as fellow survivors of her manipulation. Meanwhile, my mother's campaign against me escalated. She called distant relatives, telling them I was evicting my homeless sister and her children out of pure greed. Anonymous posts appeared on neighborhood social media pages claiming I was an absent property owner, allowing a historic family home to deteriorate. The lockbox containing the spare key was vandalized twice. After each incident, I documented everything, followed my lawyer's advice, and perhaps most importantly, began therapy to process the emotional toll of the ongoing conflict. Dr. Marshall, my therapist, helped me recognize patterns in my family dynamic that had shaped my behavior for decades. You've been cast in the role of the responsible one for so long that you've internalized it, she observed. It's created a perfectionism that makes it hard for you to ask for help or show vulnerability. Because whenever I did, I was told to handle it myself, I realized. While Allison got support for every crisis, exactly. Your mother created a dynamic where Allison was perpetually needy and you were perpetually self-sufficient, allowing her to maintain control over both of you in different ways. These insights were painful but liberating. I began to see how my drive for financial security and independence, while positive in many ways, was partly rooted in the knowledge that I couldn't count on family support in a crisis. I'd built walls to protect myself, but those same walls had sometimes prevented me from forming deep connections with others. As the weeks passed, I also reconnected with my father, who offered a perspective on my mother I'd never fully understood before. Your mother has always needed to be needed, he explained during one of our long phone conversations. It gives her purpose, a sense of importance. Allison fulfilled that need by constantly requiring rescue. You frustrated it by being self-sufficient. So she punished me for not needing her, I concluded. In a way, yes. Though I doubt she sees it that consciously. These conversations helped me develop a more nuanced understanding of my family's dysfunction without excusing the genuine harm that had been done. They also strengthened my resolve to establish healthier boundaries moving forward. As the end of Allison's second month under our agreement approached, I made a decision that surprised even me. I drafted a legitimate rental agreement with more favorable terms than our temporary arrangement. Instead of expecting her to find a new place immediately, I would allow her to rent the house for up to 2 years at below market rate, provided she maintained the property and followed specific rules regarding my personal belongings stored there. It was a compromise that honored both Grandma's intention for me to manage the property responsibly and my growing desire to help Allison achieve genuine independence rather than the false support our mother had provided. When I presented the offer to Allison, she seemed genuinely moved. "Why would you do this after everything that happened?" she asked. "Because I think Grandma was right about me making fair decisions about this house," I replied. "And because your kids deserve stability while you get back on your feet, really on your feet, not just temporarily bailed out." Allison agreed to consider the offer, but requested time to think about it. Her response, when it came 3 days later, was not what I expected. "I appreciate the offer more than I can say," she told me, "but I've decided we need a completely fresh start, away from Mom's influence. I've applied for a job in Vancouver, Washington. It's only 30 minutes from here, but across the state line far enough that Mom can't just drop by, unannounced." "Are you sure?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "The rental offer stands if you change your mind." "I'm sure," she said with newfound determination. "For the first time in my life, I'm making a decision that isn't about what Mom wants or what you have. It's about what's best for me and my kids." I couldn't help but feel proud of her in that moment. Perhaps the silver lining of this whole ordeal was that both of us were finally breaking free from the unhealthy patterns that had defined our relationship for decades. As it turned out, we would both need this newfound strength for the final confrontation that was yet to come. The decisive moment arrived unexpectedly on a rainy Saturday in October, just over 3 months after I'd discovered Allison living in my house. I had come to Portland for the weekend to help her sort through belongings in preparation for her move to Vancouver. Her job at the bakery had turned into a management position, and she'd found an affordable 3-bedroom apartment near her new workplace. We were in the attic, organizing boxes, when we heard the front door open downstairs. "Are you expecting someone?" I asked, immediately alert. Allison shook her head, looking concerned. "The kids are at their father's this weekend." We descended the stairs cautiously to find our mother standing in the living room, surveying the half-packed boxes with obvious displeasure. "So it's true," she said by way of greeting. "You're actually leaving." "Hello to you too, Mom," Allison replied, her voice steady. "Yes, I'm moving next weekend. I was going to call you once everything was finalized." "And where exactly are you going?" Mom demanded. "Some apartment that's half the size of this house, I suppose?" "It's a nice place near my new job," Allison said simply. "The kids will have their own rooms." Mom turned to me accusingly. "Are you happy now? Forcing them into some cramped apartment when they could have stayed here?" Before I could respond, Allison stepped forward. "Rebecca didn't force us to leave, Mom. This was my decision. I found a good job, and I'm ready to stand on my own." "Stand on your own?" Mom repeated incredulously. "Since when has that ever worked out for you? You need family support, Allison. You always have." "Maybe I needed help," Allison acknowledged, "but not the kind that comes with strings attached. Not the kind that keeps me dependent." Mom's expression hardened. "I see. Rebecca has poisoned you against me." "This isn't about Rebecca," Allison insisted. "It's about me making healthy choices for myself and my children. By moving away from your only family? How is that healthy?" "We're not moving to Mars, Mom. Vancouver is half an hour away. But yes, I need some distance from certain dynamics." Our mother's face flushed with anger. "After everything I've done for you, who watched your children while you went on interviews? Who helped you when Mark left? Who found you a place to live when you were about to be homeless?" "You did," Allison acknowledged. "And I'm grateful. But you also made me feel incapable of handling anything on my own. You inserted yourself into every decision, every aspect of my life. Because you needed me. I needed support, not control." Mom turned to me, eyes blazing. "This is your doing. You've turned her against me just like you did with your grandmother. I haven't done anything except enforce boundaries, I replied calmly. Allison is making her own decisions. Convenient how those decisions now align with what you want, Mom sneered. You always were manipulative, Rebecca. That's enough, Mom, Allison said firmly. Rebecca has been more than fair. The fact that you can't see that says more about you than her. Mom stared at her in disbelief. So that's it? You're choosing her side? There shouldn't be sides in a family, Allison replied, echoing her words from months earlier. But if you force me to choose between someone who respects my independence and someone who undermines it, that's not really a choice at all. Something seemed to snap in our mother then. Her face contorted with rage as she grabbed the nearest object, a framed family photo, and hurled it against the wall. The glass shattered spectacularly. Fine, she shouted. If this is how you both want it, don't come crying to me when everything falls apart. And don't think you're taking anything that belongs to this family, Allison. Not one thing. She began grabbing items from nearby shelves, photo albums, decorative pieces, books, stuffing them into her oversized purse. Mom, stop, Allison cried. Those aren't yours to take. They're family possessions. And I'm family, Mom retorted. More family than either of you deserve. I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and called 911 for the second time in as many months. I'm reporting a break-in and theft at my property, I told the dispatcher, giving the address. The intruder is becoming violent. Intruder? Mom sputtered indignantly. I'm your mother. You're an unwelcome visitor damaging my property, I corrected her. And you've been repeatedly warned not to enter without permission. You wouldn't dare call the police on your own mother, she said. But I could see uncertainty creeping into her expression. They'll be here in approximately 5 minutes, I informed her after ending the call. I suggest you leave before they arrive. For a moment, I thought she might escalate further. Her hands clenched and unclenched at her sides as she glared between Allison and me. But finally, she dropped the items she'd collected back onto the coffee table. This isn't over, she said coldly. Neither of you will survive without me. You'll see. After she stormed out, Allison and I stood in stunned silence amid the broken glass and scattered belongings. I'm sorry, Allison said finally. I should have known she'd react like this when she found out I was really leaving. It's not your fault, I assured her. Mom's behavior is her responsibility, not yours. When the police arrived minutes later, we filed a report documenting the incident. The officer recommended a temporary restraining order, given the pattern of escalating behavior, and I promised to consider it. After they left, Allison and I sat on the porch swing, Grandma's favorite spot, processing what had happened. I think this is really it, Allison said quietly. The breaking point, probably, I agreed. At least for a while. Are you okay with that? She asked. I considered the question carefully. I'm sad about it, I admitted. Not because I'll miss the manipulation and drama, but because it shouldn't have to be this way. A healthy mother would celebrate your independence and respect my boundaries. We didn't get a healthy mother, Allison observed. No, we didn't. But maybe we can still have a healthy relationship with each other. She smiled tentatively. I'd like that. The following week, I helped Allison and the children move into their new apartment. It was indeed smaller than Grandma's house, but bright and modern, with a community playground visible from the living room windows. Emma, Tyler, and Lily each had their own bedroom for the first time in their lives, and they raced around excitedly, making plans for decorating. Watching them, I felt a complex mix of emotions: pride in Allison's growing independence, hope for her children's more stable future, relief at resolving the property dispute, and lingering sadness about the family fracture that seemed increasingly permanent. After the move was complete, I returned to Portland to prepare the house for what I had decided would be its next chapter. After much reflection, I had chosen to sell the property rather than rent it out, as originally planned. The events of the past months had imbued it with complicated memories, and I realized I wanted a clean break both financially and emotionally. I listed the house with a respected local agent, requesting they highlight its historical features and family-friendly neighborhood. Within 3 weeks, I had multiple offers, accepting one from a young couple expecting their first child. They loved the house's character and the established garden, just as Grandma would have wanted. Before the closing, I set aside a portion of the anticipated proceeds to establish education funds for Emma, Tyler, and Lily. I may have been selling Grandma's house, but I could still honor her values by investing in the future of her great-grandchildren. I also used some of the money to purchase a smaller investment property in Seattle, closer to my primary residence and easier to manage. This felt like a decision Grandma would have approved: practical, forward-looking, and aligned with my long-term financial goals. The first holiday after these changes was Thanksgiving. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't attend the traditional family gathering at my mother's house. Instead, I invited Allison and the children to my apartment in Seattle. We cooked together, played board games, and began creating new traditions untainted by manipulation and old grievances. As the months passed, my mother made several attempts to re-establish control, sending guilt-inducing messages, enlisting relatives to plead her case, even showing up unannounced at my office once. Each time, I maintained my boundaries firmly, but without malice. Allison faced similar challenges but showed surprising resilience. I feel stronger every time I say no to her manipulation, she told me during one of our now regular phone calls. Like I'm finally becoming the adult I was meant to be. By the following spring, nearly a year after the initial confrontation, both our lives had transformed significantly. My real estate business was thriving, and I had started dating someone who respected my independence rather than being intimidated by it. Allison had been promoted at work and was taking online courses toward a business degree. The children were settled in their new schools and neighborhood. Our relationship with our mother remained strained, though we had both left the door open for reconciliation should she ever recognize and respect our boundaries. I wasn't holding my breath, but I also wasn't holding on to anger anymore. The last time I visited Grandma's grave, placing her favorite yellow roses against the headstone, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. "You were right," I whispered to her memory, "about the house, about responsibility, about everything." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and I could almost hear her practical, loving voice. Sometimes life takes away something to make room for something better. In this case, what we had lost was the illusion of a healthy family dynamic. What we had gained was the truth, painful but liberating, and the opportunity to build something healthier from its foundation. As I stood to leave, I made a silent promise to Grandma and to myself. I would continue making decisions that honored both her legacy and my own worth. The house might be gone, but the values it represented, responsibility, fairness, and genuine care, would remain with me always. And perhaps that was the most valuable inheritance of all. If this story resonated with you, I'd truly appreciate your support. Standing up to family manipulation was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it changed my life for the better. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Comment below with your experience. Your story might help someone else find their courage. Please subscribe if you'd like to hear more family stories like mine, and hit that like button if this journey made you feel less alone. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes more important than the family we're born into. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your boundaries.